All right, let's jump right into a deep dive on UFC predictions, shall we? We're going to break down this upcoming fight, Ailin Perez versus Karol Rosa at UFC 311.
Sounds good.
And, it's more than just like saying, who's going to win?
Right.
We want to understand, like, how do these predictions even work?
Yeah.
What do the experts look at? What are the factors? And how can we use that to, like, make our own, smart picks?
Yeah.
Maybe place a bet, maybe not. Who knows?
I mean, yeah, that's the fun part, right? Like trying to
So-
figure out
Exactly.
who's going to win and why.
Exactly. And this fight, it's an interesting clash of styles,
Oh, yeah.
right? You've got Perez, the grappler, always wants to take it to the ground.
Ground and pound.
And then Rosa, the striker. So it's a classic matchup.
They're always exciting, yeah.
Okay.
Those are the best. When you got like a striker versus grappler, you never know how it's going to go.
Totally. And even just looking at the tail of the tape, it's kind of like, ooh, this could be interesting.
What do you see there?
Well, they both have the same leg reach, 36 inches each. But Rosa's an inch taller. She's 5'6". I wonder if that extra inch, in the stand-up is going to give her an advantage.
I mean, it could. Even just an inch in reach, that could be the difference between landing a good shot and not.
Totally, totally. And then, you got the experience factor, right?
Uh-huh.
Rose got a record of 18 wins, 6 losses. Perez, 11-2. That's a big gap in experience.
Mm-hmm.
Does that automatically make Rosa the favorite in your book?
I mean, experience definitely counts for a lot, especially in a weight class as competitive as bantamweight. I mean, she's been in the octagon a lot more. She's seen all kinds of opponents, all kinds of styles.
Right.
So, that could give her an edge, like in terms of fight IQ, staying composed under pressure.
Yeah.
But, it's not the be-all and end-all.
Right. Because Perez has been on fire lately.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, she's coming off a first-round submission win, against Daria Giliznikova.
Yeah.
That's got to give her some momentum going into this one.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that win shows she's dangerous on the ground. She can finish fights quickly. Makes you wonder, is Rosa in trouble here? Especially since she's, historically had some trouble with submissions.
That's a good point. But then again, Rosa has been on a decision streak, right? She's won her last 3, all by going the distance. It seems like she knows how to control the fight and outpoint her opponents.
Yeah, she's really good at, like, dictating the pace. She likes to keep it standing, wear him down with strikes, and just rack up those points. If she can keep Perez at a distance, and avoid those takedowns,
right,
it could be a long night for Perez.
Okay, let's talk betting odds, because this is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Rosa's the favorite at -170. Perez the underdog at +173. For people who, might not be familiar with these numbers, can you break down what they actually mean?
Sure. So basically, those odds, they reflect how the bookmakers, they see the fight. So Rosa being at -170, that means you'd have to bet $170 on her to win $100.
So lower negative number means you got to bet more to win less, basically.
Right. But it also usually means they think that fighter's more likely to win. Now, Perez, at +173, that means if you bet 100 on her, you could win 173 if she pulls off the upset.
So higher the positive number, the bigger the risk, but the bigger the payout, potentially.
Exactly. So, if you're feeling really confident about Perez, like you think she's going to surprise everyone, there's a chance to, like, really cash in.
Interesting. And just out of curiosity, I've noticed the odds, they can be a little different on different betting platforms.
Right, yeah.
Why is that?
Well, each bookmaker, they use, their own algorithms and their own analysis. They take into account all kinds of stuff, like the fighter styles, their recent performances. They even look at, like, how the public's betting. They're always trying to balance their own risk and make sure the odds are, like, competitive.
So it's kind of like even the odds makers, they have their own little biases and perspectives.
Totally. And, if you're, like, really into the numbers, it can be fun to compare the odds across different platforms and see, how they differ.
All right. So we've got the tail of the tape. We've looked at their recent form. We've kind of decoded the betting odds.
Yeah.
Now, what are the experts saying?
Well, they're leaning towards Rosa winning by decision. They're looking at her striking, her takedown defense, how she tends to control the fight. But they're also saying, hey, Perez could upset, especially if she gets Rosa on the ground.
So it's kind of like, yeah, Rosa's the favorite because of style and experience, but Perez, she's got that X factor.
Right, the potential to turn the fight upside down.
Exactly. Okay. But let's step back for a second. Beyond this fight, I'm curious about, like, How do these prediction methods apply to other things in life?
That's a good question.
What can we learn about, just the concept of prediction from this?
Well, I think, like, one thing is how we use data.
Right.
We're looking at fighter stats, their records, their styles.
It's like gathering information.
Yeah, it's like we're trying to understand their strengths and weaknesses. And we do the same thing in other areas of life, right? Like when we're making business decisions or even personal financial decisions.
Right, right. But it's not just about numbers, is it? There's also that gut feeling.
Oh, totally. The experienced coaches and analysts, they'll have like a feeling about a fighter. It comes from watching a lot of fights, understanding the nuances. Like they might sense, a fighter's momentum or their mental state. And that intuition combined with the data can make the predictions even better.
So it's kind of like art and science together.
I like that. I think that's true for a lot of predictions. We gather data, analyze trends, but there's always going to be that element of experience, gut feeling, and yeah, sometimes a little bit of luck.
Okay, so we're starting to see how, this applies to more than just fighting. But before we go too deep down that rabbit hole, let's talk more about the actual betting options.
Okay.
Because, a lot of people want to predict the fight, but they also want to maybe win some money. What are the different ways people can bet on a UFC fight?
So, like, the most basic bet is just picking who's going to win. Simple, right? You bet on Rosa or Perez. You win if you're right. But it can get way more interesting than that.
Like how?
Well, you can bet on the method of victory. So, like, will Rosa win by decision, like the experts are saying, or could she knock Perez out?
Right.
Maybe you think Perez is going to get a submission. Each of those has different odds, because some are more likely than others.
So even if you think Rosa wins, you might get better odds if you could say exactly how she's going to win.
Exactly. And that's just the beginning. You can bet on what round the fight ends in, whether it goes the distance at all. You can even combine different bets into what's called a parlay. That's where the big payouts can be.
So it's not just like picking a name, it's like a strategy game almost.
It is. And that's why a lot of people love it. It's not just luck. It's analyzing the fighters, understanding the odds. It makes watching the fight even more exciting.
I can see that. It's like you're almost participating in the fight with your knowledge and your predictions.
Totally. But, always got to remember, gamble responsibly. Only bet what you can afford to lose. Never chase those losses. Just think of it as fun, an extra thrill.
Absolutely. So we talked about the data, the odds, the experts. But we keep coming back to this question, is it art or science?
Yeah.
Like we could look at the numbers, but what of those gut feelings, those things you can't really measure?
That's where the art comes in, I think. Those gut feelings, those insights you get from watching a ton of fights, understanding the sport really deeply.
Like you're saying, sensing a fighter's momentum or their mental state.
Exactly. It's about seeing those subtle things that don't show up in the stats, but they can make a huge difference in the fight.
So to wrap up this part of our deep dive, it seems like predicting a UFC fight, it's this mix of art and science.
Definitely.
We've got the data, the odds, the experts, but then there's that human element that keeps us guessing.
That's what keeps it so exciting. It's crazy how sometimes those gut feelings, like the art of it all, can actually be more accurate than the data sometimes.
Yeah, totally. I've seen so many upsets where, like, the fighter with the worst record, worse odds, they just find a way to win.
Happens all the time. It's like momentum. Or maybe they're just on fire that night, Or sometimes it's mental. They just believe in themselves so much that it doesn't matter what the stats say.
I think that's part of what makes UFC so exciting to watch, right? It's not just physical, it's a mental battle too.
Absolutely. And for people who like to bet, it makes things a lot more unpredictable. You can't just rely on the numbers. You got to try and figure out those mental factors, see who's got that edge.
Okay, so for someone who's like brand new to UFC betting, what advice would you give them? Like, where do they even start?
Research, research, research. You got to know the fighters, their styles, what they're good at, what they struggle with. Watch their old fights. Read what the experts are saying. Get a feel for how they fight.
So it's not just like picking a random name.
No way. It's about knowing who these fighters are, like almost like you're their coach.
Right, right. And once you've done your research, then you can start looking at the different bets you can make.
Exactly. Like we talked about, you can bet on who wins, how they win, what round it ends in. There's a lot of options.
And for the real risk takers, there's those parlays, right? They're combining a bunch of predictions for a big payout.
Yeah, but those are risky. All your predictions have to be right to win. So it's high risk, high reward.
So there's something for everyone. whether you want to play it safe or go big.
Exactly. The important thing is to bet responsibly, you know? Only bet what you can afford to lose. Don't go chasing losses. Keep it fun.
Totally. So we've talked a lot about, like, the general stuff, but let's get back to Perez versus Rosa.
Oh.
If you had to put money down, who would you pick?
Tough one. Just going by the data, the expert opinions, I'd probably go with Rosa. Her experience, her striking, how good she is at avoiding takedowns. She's a tough opponent for anyone.
But you're not counting Perez out completely.
No, not at all. Perez has shown she can be dangerous, especially if she gets Rosa on the ground. And that's why this fight is so interesting. It could go either way.
Right, because even with all the predictions and analysis, one little moment can change everything.
That's why we love this sport. You just never know what's going to happen.
So the experts might say Rosa, but Perez could definitely pull off an upset.
For sure. That's why it's so fun to break it all down, look at the different factors, and make those predictions. Even if you're wrong, it's a cool process.
Totally agree. Okay, for everyone listening, what are some key takeaways for predicting fights and making smart bets?
Okay, first, do your homework. Don't just bet randomly. Take the time to really get to know the fighters.
Knowledge is power, right?
100%. Second, know your betting options. It's not just about picking a winner. Figure out what kind of bets fit your style, how much risk you want to take.
And like you said before, bet responsibly.
Always don't bet what you can't afford to lose. Keep it fun. And lastly, remember that predicting fights, it's part art, part science. The numbers matter, but so does that gut feeling.
Yeah, it's like finding that balance between what your head tells you and what your gut tells you.
Exactly. And sometimes you got to embrace the chaos, Even the best predictions can be wrong, and that's okay.
Well said. Before we get to our final predictions, I want to talk more about that mental side of MMA.
Yeah, for sure. That's huge. People don't always think about that.
It's not just about being strong or having good technique. It's about mental toughness, being able to stay calm under pressure.
Exactly. That can make or break a fighter, Someone who's confident, who can adapt when things get tough, they're more likely to win.
So when we're analyzing a fight, we got to look at that too. How strong is their mind? Absolutely. Look at their past fights, listen to their interviews, see how they train. Anything that gives you clues about their mental game, how they deal with pressure.
Right. Because sometimes those little hints about their mindset, those can be the most important thing.
Totally agree. It's about seeing the whole fighter, not just their stats.
So as we make our final predictions, let's keep that in mind. Maybe that'll help us figure out who wins.
Can't wait to see how it all plays out. This fight, it's got so much going on physically and mentally.
Okay, one last time. Let's focus on Ailin Perez versus Karol Rosa at UFC 311.
All right, let's do it.
All right, it's prediction time. We've gone over the stats, the styles, the odds, even the mental game. Now let's put it all together. If you were putting money down, who you got?
Okay, if I'm betting, I'm probably still leaning towards Rosa. Just all around, she's a tough opponent, experience, that striking volume, and she's really good at defending those takedowns.
But you're not like completely writing Perez off because we've seen upsets and she's got those submissions. That could flip the script so fast.
Oh, absolutely right. Never count Perez out. If she gets Rosa down, it's a whole different fight. And that's what makes this matchup so fun, right? Could go either way.
So for everyone listening who's been with us on this deep dive, what are some things they should be thinking about when making their own prediction, whether they're betting or just watching,
I think a big one is how each fighter deals with pressure. Rosa's been in those big fights, more experience there. But Perez, she's shown she's tough, she can bounce back. How they react when things get intense, that's going to be key.
Good point. Beyond that, like what about the actual fighting? What should people be watching for?
For Rosa, it's staying at range, using those strikes. Keep Perez away, avoid those takedowns, just wear her down over time. For Perez, she needs to get in close, get past those strikes, take it to the ground where she's strong.
So classic striker versus grappler, both with a way to win if they fight their fight.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so fun to break down, to try and predict. It's like a chess match, back and forth.
Okay, so we got to wrap this up. Final predictions. Expert, you first.
All right, I'm going to stick with Rosa, decision win. Just think she's going to control it, keep Perez at bay. But wouldn't shock me if Perez gets an upset, especially if she gets that early takedown.
Interesting. I'm actually going to go out on a limb and say Perez pulls it off. I've been impressed with her lately. Those submission skills are no joke, and I think mentally she might have an edge here. But hey, that's MMA, right? You never know.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Anything can happen in there.
So to all our listeners, we've given you the info, the analysis. Now you make the call. Rosa's experience in striking or Perez with the ground game and that potential upset.
No matter what, it's going to be a good one. Skill, strategy, mental toughness, it's all on display.
And remember, everyone, bet responsibly if you're betting, and just enjoy the show.
We'll be back soon, breaking down more fights, talking more MMA. Until then, keep practicing those prediction skills. See if you can beat the odds makers.
And if you're watching UFC 311, let us know who you're cheering for. See if your predictions were right. Always down for a good debate. Until next time, enjoy the fights.